Thanks for tuning in to Gin and Tantra, Spirituality with a Twist. You have Daniel driving the ship, co piloted by our good friend and contributor, Dr. Rory Hiltbrand. Rory, thank you for joining us today, my friend.
My pleasure.
Glad to have you back. Um, but really, Rory is driving the ship today. The genesis of this episode is comes from the mind of one Dr. Rory. So if we crash, it's his fault. But if we take off into orbit and fly away, it is also his fault. So we're going to kind of have some conceptual discussions on what we would call the holographic nature of the universe, and in sort of Taoist cosmology and many other cosmologies, really, there's this kind of idea of a microcosm and a macrocosm, that the universe is sort of repeating itself on larger and smaller scales, sort of infinitum. And we're going to discuss these kind of related topics. So if you're into that, you're in the right place. And if you're not into that, then check out a cat video. That would also be entertaining. So yeah. But anyways, thanks for tuning in. And Rory, let's take it away.
Sure. So, as you know, I have a little bit of a mathematics background.
Yeah,
I'm
just a
a
bit.
yeah, mathematical economics major, and I was in a research fellowship with the NSF where I studied chaos theory.
Mm-hmm.
And I presented in 2011 numerical methods for detecting chaos in dynamic systems in San Francisco, and so it's a lot of fun. It's a really interesting topic, and it's a newer branch of mathematics. But it was really fascinating to me one time. My Taoist master, when I was studying with my Taoist lineage, Master Sung, he was describing the microcosm and the macrocosm, and he was effectively, to him, Taoism is multidimensional math. And so we have this rules and geometry structure of the universe that repeats. And so when you have a repeating function, it's called iterative. So if you repeat a function over and over, the iterative function creates what's called a fractal. That's where fractals come from. And the fractal is just the same pattern at different scales.
Mm.
And so effectively, what you get from these Taoist laws of the universe is this same pattern or cosmology that's at different scales. And that's where we get the concept of the microcosm to the macrocosm. In the Yunchi, you've seen me talk about the Yunchi a lot. That's like core to the Dohan
Maybe just
cosmology.
two words on it, because we have our audience is quite new all the time. So
Yeah, yeah. So it's basically a portion, one of the fundamental texts of Taoism and Chinese medicine
hmm
is the Neijing, the inner classic. And that's composed of two texts, the Su Wen and the Ling Shu. Both are 81 chapters, so that gives you a hint into the, nine squared encoded with this numerology.
yeah.
And chapters 66 through 74 make up, even though it's a small number of chapters, it makes up a third of the text by volume. So it's a huge part of this understanding, and it outlines. There's different schools of thought, like five elements and the six stages of Shanghan Lun. It combines them into one theory, but it's not widely understood, and it's not widely taught.
Correct.
But within it also talks about when you understand these five elements and six chi, you can then begin to understand the near and the far. Basically, this whole concept of the microcosm to macrocosm. So, as Taoists, we study this small unit that's easily accessible to us, the near,
Our
our
body.
body.
Yeah.
Yeah, within, to know without, to know the, so knowing, studying and knowing this pattern of the human body, we can know, the whole universe.
hmm
And so we understand things like time through how it's processed through our body. We understand all kinds of phenomena, everything, the whole
hmm
universe through our body. And some interesting things I've been thinking about recently is we apply this Tai Chi symbol to our energy anatomy. So the Tai Chi ball, we see it as a two-dimensional picture, but really it's displaying the Tai Chi is what portrays yin and yang.
Yeah.
You know, that
And for
symbol
people
of
who don't know what that is, yin and yang, because that's how people love they love to say
yin
that.
yang twins.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is the classic symbol of the circle with the white. For those who don't know, of kind of like the black wave with the white dot and the white wave with the black dot.
exactly. But that's just, you know, a two-dimensional portrayal of a higher dimensional reality.
Mm-hmm.
So when we studied that in the Dohan, it's described as a vortex,
Mm-hmm.
the Tai Chi. So it's actually more like a hurricane with an eye in the center, an
Yes.
empty space in the center. So it's not really like the white fish has a black eye and the black fish has a white eye. It's more like you are looking through the white side of the sphere through the empty space and you can see the black eye.
Mm-hmm.
And from the other side, you look through the black side and you can see the white side through
Mm-hmm.
it. And so when you map this torus dynamic to the human body, it gives us essentially uh, this whole concept of heaven coming into earth.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this big ball that's spinning downward and then rotates back up. So effectively, like I give this example all the time of like if you just imagine your favorite dessert, you begin to salivate, your insulin will spike, your blood glucose will go down, and it you can imagine things that affect your physical system. When you think of stressful things, you can spike your cortisol, increase your norepinephrine, epinephrine, so on and so
Right.
forth. If you worry enough, you can produce enough gastric acid to give you an ulcer.
Yeah.
So your mental, this subtle mental, spiritual wisdom, all of that comes into your emotion down into physical form.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the placebo effect. As we know of it, our thoughts are influencing our physical body.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is foundational to Taoist theory. And it's also interesting because in the Yunchi, it gets into what is the texture of your thoughts and how is it affecting different aspects of your five elemental physical form, different organs, etc. Now, when you think about the placebo effect through looking at it through the lens of the microcosm to the macrocosm, the the placebo effect isn't just, you know, an exception in this that we have to rub out. The placebo effect is the law.
Right.
It's the rule.
Yeah.
And so this whole, if you look at it from this macrocosmic universe, the way that we perceive this is that it's just a giant placebo effect. This three-dimensional reality is a projection of higher dimensional consciousness
Mm.
too. And that's another, I've been thinking about that and then also thinking about how time and space, you know, if you've seen Interstellar and the you know, he goes near a black hole
Yeah.
and he ages much faster because the
Mm-hmm.
time and space is bent from that planet. In Taoism, we are projecting time and space all the time. And how's Buddy doing over there?
Yeah, he's all right.
He's um, so we're projecting time and space all the time.
Mm.
We don't have a problem with that when we go to when we talk about our dreams, that it's a projection of our own mind. But
Right. Correct.
we object to that when we talk about, you know, you and I talking right now, or, you know, anyone with their day-to-day experience.
Mm.
But in the same way, it's like in your dream, you believe this to just be a product of your dream brain, you know.
Mm.
And my master sung. asked me one time because I was taking physics when I first met him. I was
Hmm.
trying to pursue a graduate degree in physics. And so I was like, what is this fundamental substrate of the universe?
The ether, as they try and call it.
And yeah, and he was just saying you're still too wrapped up in time and cause and effect. And he said, what do you think your dreams are made of? Quarks and gluons? And that really struck with me too, that this is all really consciousness. But it may be too much to go into right now, but we are constantly manipulating our own time flow within our human body and the perception of time.
Mm.
And for us, it may be like, we may object to that and say, no, a second's a second. But if you look at planets, which are just another scale of the same pattern,
Sure.
they are totally warping, bending space and time
The
at this
argument
higher
that
scale.
people are going to say, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to say, but if you want to have a discussion, please leave a comment in the YouTube section or wherever, or hit us
Yeah.
up at ginandtantra@gmail.com, or leave hit us up on the podcast, Gin and Tantra podcast. But, they're going to reference gravity, right?
Uh-huh.
Gravity as the source of dilation of time,
Hmm.
right? And so while this is, true as we know it to be currently, how does I mean, we don't have as much gravitational mass as a planet does, and our
Hmm.
planet doesn't have as much gravitational mass as a larger planet does. So isn't it inherent in the difference in mass that their gravitational field will have an effect on the dilation of time? Is what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
so the larger scale will definitely affect it. But we, in our Taoist clan, the Chong Mai, we call this force of gravity.
And the Chong Mai, for those who are keeping score.
So that's the eye of that torus, that
Mm,
central column. That's what enables you to project your own reality stronger, is you're
mm,
able to bend space and time to
mm,
create these seemingly synchronicities in reality.
mm. So let me do a little bit of a recap here for those who are with us and who are listening or watching on any platform that you might be watching it on.
I might have
Um,
lost everyone already.
no, we're good. So I'll bring it. I'm going to bring it. I'll bring it hold to you. Okay. So in summation for where we are right now, just in case you didn't get it, and if this is a repetition, then you get to hear my stupid voice. So whatever. Um, so the Tai Chi symbol, okay, the yin yang symbol, the coin of the black and the white, right, is a two-dimensional representation of a sphere. Relatively, we'll call it a sphere for now, right? Now, if I'm drawing on a piece of paper that is flat, which most paper is flat, you cannot really draw well three-dimensionally. It's still two-dimension upon two-dimension. But if I'm going to represent a three-dimensional object on a piece of paper, it's going to be in two dimensions. So how would I represent a sphere on a two-dimensional piece of paper? With a circle. Now, if I simply put a hole in the middle of that circle, you will believe that that circle has a hole in it. That's the end of it. And now it's not a circle anymore. We call that a wheel. But it's not a wheel. It's a sphere that has a tube in the center. And so you have that tube represented by both holes, top and bottom, if you want to call it top and bottom. That then is a representation of what I would describe as our aura, right? Our electromagnetic field that surrounds us. And I watched a documentary, and I'll have to send it to you. Um, and I'm going to try and get the director on here. But it's a documentary on the heart in particular.
Mhm.
And they show some research on the heart. And one of the things that they find out is that the body is able to pump blood even at minutes after the heart is stopped. Now, this goes against conventional theory that the heart is merely a pump. And there's multiple reasons for why this is not correct. Number one, because the capillaries, which is the vessels of the blood that are at the end of our limbs, right, like in the smallest parts of our bodies, they have a diameter, I believe, of like 5 to 6 nanometers. Your red blood cells have a diameter of 6 to 7 nanometers. So it's larger than the capillaries. What does that mean? Who cares, Daniel? I can't measure. I don't even have a ruler out. No problem. What I'm saying is that the heart cannot produce enough pressure based on its size relative to the body to do the pumping exclusively as a pump. So that's one. And then when we stop the heart, the blood continues to pump. Okay. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that energy is coming from somewhere else. Somewhere else. So they did these like experiment with a little egg that had an embryo in it. They took the top off the egg. They put in some, I forgot what it was, potassium sulfide, something to stop the beating of the heart. And yet the blood kept pumping. And then when they put red infrared light on it, the blood would continue to pump
Mhm.
for another 20 to 30 minutes. So what does that
When you
mean?
say pump, do you mean flow?
Yeah, flow. Sorry.
Yeah,
The blood
yeah.
is flowing, not pumping. You're right. The blood is
Mhm.
flowing. Well, what does that mean? The heart is not the exclusive pump of the blood, number one. And number two, we are getting the rest of the energy in order to overcome inertia from our environment.
Mhm.
In a related study, they checked the electromagnetic field around the heart and around the brain. So again, we're in this physics episode, so we're going to do some physics, right? So and Rory probably could describe this a little bit better than I can because I only have a minor in physics, not I'm just a baby. But anything that has an electrical current will have a magnetic field surrounding it. And so you have this kind of relationship between electricity and magnetism, which is why Magneto and Storm get along so well for those who like comic books. um, but anyways, what does that mean? That means that the field around an electrical current can be measured. And so they measure the current or they measure the field around our brain. Get this, about an inch away from the body. That's cool. The heart, you know how big? About 3 feet. So I give all of this as technical examples that not only are we not just simply matters of mass, but we are matters of energy too. And I'm going to tie this together now. And the idea of an aura, meaning that I can mathematically with tools can detect the uh, electromagnetic field 3 feet away from my body. So the idea that we are part of uh, this spherical structure that is surrounding us is not only is it not far-fetched, it is verifiable by scientific technology today.
Mhm.
So
Well, let me ask, did you do a hot rod reference earlier?
Hot
With the
Rod,
Yeah, have you seen that movie?
I have not seen the movie,
Oh,
but I
then
might have in my previous life.
okay. He goes saying what weird in it.
Oh,
Weird.
the W's. That's what?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's from Stewart from Family Guy. Cool,
Oh,
cool,
okay.
cool, cool.
Got it. Are you familiar with EZ water? Gerald Pollack's
I think
research.
so.
So it's basically um it it I think it sounds a lot like what you're talking about with the heart not being a pump too. And
Mm.
it's basically we're going off on a
Yeah, let's not
tangent
let's
here,
not
but
derail. I wanted a summary and I wanted to make it even more tangible because I'm a Capricorn. So
yeah. Well, I gotta it's just running through me, so I gotta
Okay,
talk a little
good.
bit
Go
about it.
for it.
Sorry.
You're good.
So like even like a tree, how does a tree without a motor or a pump get water up to its top branches
Yeah,
you know, without water? And so basically and especially with infrared light, they found that
yeah.
water itself, since it's all these magnetic little dipoles,
Mm-hmm.
it'll arrange itself into this what he calls exclusion zone. It makes like a hexagonal lattice of
Mm.
water molecules. And so that's what they think is involved in the circulatory system as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And yeah,
So
and
as a advertisement for our businesses, we've been having infrared lights in the in the treatment rooms for a long time, far before it was popular. You know, with the mega millionaires who want to live until they're 200. This is old hat for us. I've been getting people tan on a treatment table for since I started.
yeah, and that's Shaolian energy too,
Yeah,
and that it benefits the heart and the kidneys.
yeah. So okay, so continuing on from where you were before. So now we have this torus around us, this sphere around us, with the pole in the center that runs up and down our body, that
Mhm,
some might call shushumna in like yogic terminology. You're going to call it in the Chinese medical terminology, the Chong Mai, the central channel, or they call it with
mhm,
the vessel of gushing and rushing, or something like this.
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, and just some other thoughts that I'm thinking about with it is like when you look at certain concepts from different scales, and it
Sure.
kind of breaks apart duality from this relativity concept. So in relativity, the time flow, certain things are consistent or uniform in what's called an inertial coordinate system. And so what we're doing is changing our view, our Dao Guan, what it's called is our Taoist view, to look at the same question from different scales
Mm,
and really take a look at it. So it's almost like Zen koans. So
yeah.
if you think about like, is is it free will or destiny, this predicament that we're in?
Mm,
And so if you think that it's free will, you have to suppose that there's an individual that can have free will.
mm-hmm.
But if you suppose that it's fate, well, what is fate other than the free will of God at another level?
Mm,
So free will and fate, it's almost like syntax error if you can look at it from all scales.
sure.
Yeah.
You know uh not agnostics, but the Gnostic approach, right?
Mm-mm.
So the Gnostics, and we've had on kind of a guy who has a pretty big Gnostic podcast. He's written books, he's done all kinds of stuff. Miguel Connor, shout out to Miguel. What's it called? Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio. That's his thing, and so he's pretty knowledgeable on the topic. And we've had him on before, and we've done some Gnostic episodes. But their idea is that like God is above all of the things, and we are being influenced by they call them the demiurge or demiurges, these other minor gods that are like messing with God's actual plan
Mm.
for us, and having a negative effect on reality. That's their belief. So that's another slightly smaller scale than.
Yeah, and we kind of in within that great torus that you're contained in,
Mm-hmm,
it has 7 levels each time.
mm-hmm,
So this is what's interesting in Taoism. And any time that you would have like a expand, like shoot out of your crown into a
mm-hmm.
different plane entirely, you're not
Like
having like a
like via meditation, or via dreaming, or via death, or all the above.
any of
Anytime.
these. But
Okay.
death doesn't necessarily mean through the crown.
Sure.
Also, you can. Um, so meditation. Some people have these experiences on DMT too, where it's
Mm,
like an unfolding of geometry, like unwrapping wrapping paper, or like the blossoming of a flower, which I think a lot of depictions
mm-hmm.
of deities comes from, is like this thousand petaled lotus, like this
Mm,
geometry, just an experience of these. When we talk about higher dimensions, it's also literal
mm,
in a sense. So, and not just literal, there's also its quality and geometry is quite different, and experience and intensity. But anytime that you are in like a certain plane, so we talk about a hologram, there's like multiple layers. We have 7 layers. So each time you can go up or down, you have 7 layers, which just is an interesting aside. If anyone's into mathematics, they can look into bot periodicity. So in mathematics, we have this periodicity of 7 dimensions, 0 through 7, going on and on.
And bot is
Anyways,
B. How do you BAHT?
BOTT,
Oh, bot.
bot periodicity. And this is just speculation, but I think it's a fascinating parallel.
Okay.
And so that central channel,
Mm-hmm.
that central eye of that torus that expands up to another eye, almost like it was Mahashivaratri yesterday. And the form of Shiva, when Brahman and Vishnu have an argument over who's more powerful, Shiva comes and shows them his true form of this unending, still column of light.
Mm.
And so that's the same in the Taoist cosmology. Your Chongmai is like your connection to the Tao, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the unchanging Tao universe,
Yeah.
the way. And so it projects out, it branches out at all these different levels, and those create within them is like a tiny dot of stillness within these toruses that project out, dual toruses. And so there's a stillness within each of those. So it's almost like there's a God within each of them. So it's like we have these infinities, but there's different scales of infinity.
Mm.
So we can have different sized infinities. And another thing that I've been thinking about, we were talking about how AI is really trendy, and I had asked my teacher, what does Taoism tell us about AI? Like, can AI be conscious? Can AI be spiritual?
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, yes, the AI can imitate up to 6 dimensional consciousness,
Mm.
but since it doesn't have a Chongmai of its own, it's just, it can only imitate that pure light.
Mm. It's not a. It's not its own. It's not a progeny.
It's like a reflection of the existing light. Like we can still say that, Venus is out and it's shining, but it's not through its own light.
Right. But they make this reference in the in Buddhism. They have a couple funny stories in Zen too, that the reflection of the moon in the water is not the true moon,
Yeah.
right? And that they have another one that says a dog is walking on a bridge with a piece of meat in its mouth that he just stole. And then he's walking over a body of water and he looks down and he sees this dog walking by him with a piece of meat in his mouth. So he jumps off the bridge to get the other dog's piece of meat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's a reflection.
Yeah. But it's not, yeah, it's not the real thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought that was, you know, kind of
Yeah.
fascinating to think
So
about.
Rory, let me ask. All right, so as somebody you've been, studying this, it's totally in your vibe as a, math person and a Taoist mathematician, if we can call you, you know,
Hmm.
accessing this,
Hmm.
right? Become because we talk about, okay, if you leave through the crown, there these, we're all this type of discussion. But like, what is the for somebody who is not an acupuncturist, who is not using these points in that way, for someone who's a practitioner of Taoism or a meditative practitioner, or someone who wants to, I don't know, alter their state of consciousness and then try and play around. What would you say to that person about being more involved in this reality from a different perspective, or not a different perspective, but another viewpoint?
I think, just listening to talks like this can really expand your mind and open yourself in subtle ways. And opening your mind will have subtle effects to your energy and your body. You know, what you that's what the placebo effect really is. There's an old saying, there's one man who says he can't and one man who says he can, and they're both right.
Mm,
And so it's not that, if you want to cultivation, a lot of people ask that, what's the best way to cultivate? Should I visualize a Tai sphere and sit in it? And it really depends. It really depends on your context in that moment in time and your nature, and there's so many things, and really I think the most important one is to get comfortable, in yourself, and
mm,
you know, it, you know, the less tension, the better conductor. And that really is your true nature, is nature itself. It's not something separate that you are life. You are life itself. It's not some distant force that you have to obtain. And so, and a lot of people hear that, but it doesn't really hit home for them. It's hard to try and relax. And so I think I definitely suffered from, like, I was greedy to have like big experiences,
sure. Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
probably why I went
Yeah.
down the route of DMT and stuff. But really, the alchemical process really, you start to really hit gold when you really relax and accept and surrender.
Mm,
And that's such a difficult thing to do because people try and, you see this all the time. People try and, they get an idea that, oh, surrendering will give me this thing,
right.
and so they try and, I remember, like sit and be like, okay, I surrender. Like, does anything
Looking
happen?
around. All right. I did it now.
Yeah.
We're good, right?
Yeah. And you see it in the clinic too.
Yeah.
People understand that, oh, they need to relieve stress in order for their health to improve. And so, relieving stress becomes this big problem that they're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And that pursuit is a huge source of stress in itself. Or
Hmm.
fertility, too. That's a huge one. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, I know I need to relax. And so trying to surrender, you know, just those deep shifts internally. That's a tough sell. And the Dohan, uh, they say, when you stop being stubborn in your own way, your karma instantly changes.
Mm,
And so there's real deep roots in our stubbornness.
hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the, what does Yoda say? There is no try. There is only do.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's a very deep thing to not be who we are.
Yeah.
That is, the people who do plant medicine, they love to call this the ego death. Oh, I
Mhm.
gotta, I gotta get, I need my ego to die. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. Oh, all right. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
I hope that
Yeah.
is a fantastic time for you. But it's an acceptance, I think, that you are a finite being.
Hmm.
At the same time, you are an infinite being,
Hmm.
and the juxtaposition between those two is a very hard. It's a, you're trying to circle a square. You can't you can't really do it without being, but with when you're only one or the other.
Hmm.
And this becomes very difficult for people because they are locked into the visual reality of life. That life is Newtonian physics. And so what I mean by this is that, like, it's pool balls.
Hmm.
Things smash around each other. This does this. This does that. I push on this car. It rolls downhill. That's how things work.
Hmm.
I am you. You are me. I'm sorry. I am me. You are you. Everybody is the listener who's listening to this is them, and everybody. And so we are this. And so when a discussion of something that would be, I guess, like eternal doesn't compute because we don't. the oldest thing that we can see is like what? A castle. And now, yes, I know we could see nature, but I mean, nature is abstract. And yeah, we could look at carbon dating of the water levels that were there and the minerals that were present and the stains they left on the rocks and say, this was here, an asteroid came here 400,000 years ago. Like that, those numbers are abstract. It is a 400,000 years ago. I'm 40. 400,000 years ago. So 100,000 of my lifetimes, an asteroid hit that thing. It doesn't make any sense. But with architecture, this was built in 1920. Oh, wow, 100 years ago. But here it is. This was built in this, you know what I'm saying? And so it
Mhm.
just becomes something very like um, non conceptual for someone to think that there's an aspect of them that is eternal.
Mhm.
And for me, I try so diligently to help people bridge that gap
Mhm.
because I think that it's such an empowering thing to be able to at least have the idea that it's possible. And then
Mhm.
when we, as like you said, when you do that, when you if you can have that, for me anyways, and I am in a death doula uh class right now, so this is fresh for me, right? And I'm wearing all black, so I guess it fits, But like that's a big it's a big relief. It's a big relief because then the struggles and the why for me why it's hard to relax is because we're trying
Mhm.
to do something. We're trying to do
Mhm.
blank. What is blank? Well, blank could be anything. But we're trying to do that thing because we believe for sure that this is the only go round I'm ever going to have here. And that's not to say to not do things, but it brings a stress. And when you're constantly stressed, you're not relaxed. And when you're not relaxed, you're stressed. And so you're not able to be in a deeper state of connectivity with what is already surrounding you because you're wrapped up in whatever things that you're trying to do. And it just becomes a very different way of living. I heard something. I'm not really a huge fan of him, but Sadhguru, he's a kind of famous
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, people talk about managing stress, stress management." He's like, "Why would you manage stress? It's not an asset. It's not a resource. You manage your money. You manage your time. You manage your employees. Why do you want to manage your stress? It's not helping you, like he's like this mentality needs to change. I'm not really a fan of it. And I was like, damn, I appreciate that. That's a good thought.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we want to mitigate our stress, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. So yeah, so I like all of that. Um yeah, so you're kind of like takeaway from your discussion on all of this is to sort of find space to relax into whatever your nature is.
Yeah. Yeah, just get comfortable and enjoy the show, you know. There's so many tangents I could go off on just thinking about, talk about time and seeing things and looking at the stars and how you're looking at
The
the
past.
past and
Yeah.
then but the photon that reached you, it didn't exist at all. Doesn't move into it didn't experience any time.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's another really deeper insight. I'm gonna go off on some tangents, I'm sorry, but another really deep insight into like E equals MC squared
Yeah.
is also that everything is moving at the speed of light.
Yes.
So it's moving at the speed of light through space time. So it's almost in the form of like a pi r squared equation where you can draw an arc of a circle. And so at the top, you'd have the speed of light going, it would look like this to you, but the speed of light moving at the speed of light through space, but not moving through time. And then down on this axis of time versus space, a black hole would be traveling at the speed of light through time,
So
but
you lost
not
me. You
not in
lost me a little bit.
space.
You lost me a little bit on that one.
Well, it's just everything's moving at the speed of light through space time, and that's distributed through either space or time,
Mm,
which also lends itself to a projection too, that everything's coming from this central light.
yeah. Yeah, well, that part I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have many questions. But when, and I'm always trying to relate this. So like when you see somebody, okay, somebody comes into the clinic and they
Mhm.
have whatever they have. But let's say it's not physical in nature. It's not like back pain or neck pain, okay?
Yeah.
How do you try and implement some of these things that you're always wrestling with, thinking about, like how do you try and bring that into like the discussion of someone's life or of someone's situation or something like this, right? Because I mean, it's not only these things are not only meant for Taoist philosophers, right? They're meant for
Mhm.
everybody to digest at whatever level they can digest them at. But so
Mhm.
that's what I'm wondering.
So usually I'll I'll talk about theory and help someone processing more if there's like a I've seen a lot of like hypoglycemia, so like a spleen, deficiency type of
Mm-hmm.
thing and
Mm-hmm.
overactive production of insulin and just there's this worry that comes with that. And so they're often processing and in their heads a lot. And so
Sure.
in those cases, I may help them to process something that they're just spinning about.
Mm-hmm.
And then so like have that's where like this wisdom can really hit home and you talk about it and you have to do this in a practical way. Then here I can just,
Yeah, yeah,
go
yeah.
off on,
Yeah.
it's all a projection. There's multiple, we're all moving in the speed. I'm not going to say that to it. I'm going to be practical in that
Yeah.
context. If they have like more of a heartache, I'm not gonna give them as much processing. I'm really going to transmit as much as I can of feeling to them.
Mm.
And I'm gonna try and move like often there's a diaphragmatic constriction, like especially if it's like in that state of like resentment where the diaphragm's preventing that
Descending.
pathogenic chi from injuring the heart. And you see them just thinking about it and they're holding their breath and then they
Right.
stop for a second, they breathe. I may try and transmit a feeling, and sometimes I'll do that not just through the needle. I might just touch a point or just press on the diaphragm and get it to release a little bit. And then we use certain like mantras to evoke certain energy through the nerve. Sorry, can you hear that? My
No,
printer? Okay, great.
no.
Um, Certain energy going through the nerve. We don't say them out loud, but it's really that same process of whatever's occurring in your mind, like the placebo we were talking about, will be activity within the nervous system itself. And so
Mm.
you create a field surrounding it and you try and transmit it's basically all the control cycle. You use a heavenly energy and you try and transmit to that organ if it's an emotional thing. But we also use that same method for if they have anemia. And so we'll put a Jue in energy into the deep level of like spleen 6 and gallbladder 39 to influence the marrow as well. And we'll resonate those with like spring energy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it really it every like we talked about before, it's all context. It depends on
Sure.
what it is, and so there's no you know one. You could say like the Tao is like the all healing energy, but in manifestation, there's more nuance
Right.
too.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, it's fascinating, man. I mean, it's always interesting to hear other people's process in the clinic, for sure.
yeah,
Like someone else's mindset with this. Um, and I know for our audience, there we do have a lot of Chinese, you know, medical practitioners and people who are into healing of various types here. But if you know, I think it's relatable for if you work on people or you work on yourself, right? And why I say that is that like how you approach things.
Hmm.
is more important than maybe the particular tool that you have. And that if you're approaching them from a very like centered space, then you have the ability to do things that you might not be consciously aware of. And that's a really wonderful place to be. And if you are a skilled practitioner, then you get to combine not only your um, education.
Hello?
Yeah, you not only get to use your education, but you get to use your experience and your intuition as well, which ultimately is for me like that's the trifecta I want to try and be in, you know.
I think that takes us full circle back to the, microcosm and macrocosm too. It's like you understand others through your own experience.
Sure.
That's how you really understand something and can relate to it, and how your words can really have power if there's like experience in
Mm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
That's people can sense when there's like a weight to your words. If even if they don't necessarily know the subject that you're talking about, you can when you're talking to someone, you're like, this person knows their stuff,
Mm-hmm.
or you can like feel the texture behind it, like
Yeah.
and so really knowing yourself deeply, you can know other knowing the near,
Yeah.
the far, you know. It's almost like people who can really, you know, some people are really into calligraphy and they can tell so much about the person just by looking at the
Yeah.
strokes.
Yeah.
Or I was surprised someone sent me a formula recently and they said, "What do you think about this formula I got from someone?" And I could see just some of their thinking in it. And
Yeah. Yeah.
they were
Yeah. Yeah.
more TCM and they were more evidence based, and I was amazed at how by knowing something really well,
Yes.
you can understand it in others. And so knowing that's the biggest key. And that's Taoism, that's Chinese medicine, is understanding. That's what I want to get to in terms of like the microcosm isn't just the microcosmic orbit and all that. It's really when you know yourself deeply, it's the key to insight into others.
I think that's a
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, it's very well worded.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Very well worded. And I think that's a good place to pause for us right there.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, Rory, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Um, I feel like I always learn so much about you, but then just about stuff in general when you come on. So I always appreciate the shares and everything else. And so we're glad to have you as a part of the project. You know,
I love being here, man.
that's
It's a great
great.
vibe.
Yeah, no, it's cool, man. So, audience, thanks for listening. Lighting is so bothering me right now, but it's okay. Listen to the audio version.
My lighting or yours?
No, mine, mine
Yeah.
died, and now whatever. It looks like I have a flashlight from the bottom, like I'm in a campground. Um,
We should
um,
do that sometime.
yeah. But anyways,
Are you afraid of the dark?
uh-huh, uh-huh. Sometimes. Um,
Mhm.
but thanks for coming on. Audience, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. We have a bunch of different contributors, and everybody brings a different vibe, which is part of what I wanted. To be honest, I like this community approach of having different voices in the same place. In order to provide value for different people. So ultimately the goal is for people to find out whatever it is that they're interested in, and then when that person comes on, we're going to be in that vein. And when other people come on, it's going to have a slightly different twist. But ultimately, everything that we are bringing to the table here is relatable-ish. It's relatable, but it also is going to take you, beyond just the mundane view. That's the hope. The goal is to leave the mundane view behind. As soon as you finish with this podcast, you can immediately go back to the mundane view if you like. But the hope is that we color your thinking for just a little bit so that you can suspend the view of reality as just merely balls smashing into each other and maybe see some fields and some potentialities for things that can help you to see things differently and then ultimately get to know yourself a little bit better, to know the universe around you a little bit better. Is that right?
Yeah, I heard a great term recently. Basically, expand beyond room temperature consciousness.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah, that works for me. That works for me. Well, Rory, thank you so much for coming on, man. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
Audience,
man.
thank you for listening. Definitely, subscribe to the work that we do here. We definitely appreciate it. And, we've been growing a bit, so we appreciate everybody who has subscribed. If you're a new viewer and you have not, and you are still here, you like what we're doing, just hit that button. It helps us out. It costs you nothing. We definitely appreciate it. If you want to get a hold of us, email ginandtantra@gmail.com. You can also leave a comment in the YouTube section, or feel free to slide in our DMs and the gram at the Gin and Tantra podcast. For Dr. Rory, this is Daniel. We'll catch you in the next one. Peace.